I'm with Chef Fadi Kattan from Bethlehem. Now, Fadi, you've just written a new book. Can you tell us about it?
Of course. Good morning from Bethlehem. So the book is actually called Bethlehem. It's journey across my city where I have recipes and stories. Food is inscribed in the people of a city, the people of a place. And what I tried to do is share this Palestinian food that I grew up with, that I cook today, with the people who matter. And the people who matter are the artisans, the farmers that come to the market, a lot of people from my family who marked me into how I cook today. So yeah, that's Bethlehem.
So it's more than just a cookbook. It's about people's lives and people here in Bethlehem.
It's a very intimate book in terms of the stories. It's beyond a cookbook. It is a cookbook and it's beyond a cookbook. I basically close your eyes and imagine I take your hand and take you on a visit to Bethlehem. That's what the book is doing.
So what sort of people do we meet in the book?
You meet a fantastic lady called Nabil who's been sitting at the entrance of the market for 45 years and sells superb herbs coming from the village of Artas, which is the biblical Hortus Conclusus. And you have to imagine that we also evolve in a city that is very strong with symbolic. You meet Hussam Halla and his father, who are the only Palestinians still extracting salt on the shores of the Dead Sea. It's a story of resilience. Since 1967 and the Israeli occupation of the West Bank, Palestinians have been denied access to the shores of the Dead Sea, and they're the only family that managed to stay on the shores of the Dead Sea. So I tell the story not only to tell the story, but because I'm profoundly convinced they make the best salt in the world. And many others like that.
Is this your first book that you've written?
It's my first book that I wholly wrote. I contributed to a book called Craving Palestine before that, which was compilation of 100 recipes by 100 Palestinians. And I did work with a German author on a book called Trio Mediterranea, he basically travels from Tunis to Sardinia to Palestine, and I do the Palestine bit with him. But this is the one that I've written all by myself.
What inspired you to write the book?
My late grandmother, Julia Dabdoub, who was one of the founders of the Arab Women's Union in Bethlehem, but also the Bethlehem Museum, which is the first ethnographic museum to be created in Bethlehem in the 70s. She taught me that love for this city, the love for Palestine, and the desire of transmission. So she wrote a very tiny book in Arabic called Lest We Forget, Lekay La Nansa, where she tells the stories of Bethlehem before 1948. She tells the story of Bethlehem's Christmases with her father. And I think that's something that I grew up with, wanting to tell the story.
Is this book for people of Bethlehem or is it for an international audience?
Well, the book is being released on the 14th and 15th of May across the world. It's coming out in the US, in Canada, in the UK, in Ireland, in Australia, and then elsewhere where there are English language bookstores. The book is actually, I would say it will satisfy very different audiences. For internationals who don't know Bethlehem, for internationals who know Bethlehem, who were here in the past, who have this nostalgia of Bethlehem, and for a lot of the Palestinians in the diaspora that have been either left in the late 1880s when Palestinians left to seek better commercial and quality of life, but also the ones who were chased in 48 and 67 by Israel. It's a link to the land. It's a link to the stories of this land.
How long did it take you to write, and where have you published it at?
2 years. It took me 2 years to write because in the meantime we opened the restaurant in London, Akub, so that got me delayed a bit. I mean, actually a bit more than 2 years. It's published by Hardy Grant, which are originally an Australian company, but it's published by Hardy Grant USA. And it was an interesting journey.
What sort of food is traditional Palestinian food?
So, food is inscribed in the terroir, the land. And we are lucky in Palestine to have, to simplify it, three terroirs: the coast, the inland, and the desert, to make it simple. In the book, you'll have more recipes from around Bethlehem because it is Bethlehem focused. It's vine leaves, it's sumac, it's za'atar, it's the creamy labna, it's the dried laban jamid, it's taboon bread, it's msakhan. There is one foray where I go up north to Sebastia next to Nablus, and there I cook a musakhan with a friend of mine who has a restaurant. But most of the recipes are very much inscribed in Bethlehem. I use a lot frika, which is that green wheat that's been charred and then the outside pellicle is taken out and it's cooked a bit like a rice. I use a lot of the seasonal fruits and vegetables. You know, the beauty of Palestinian cuisine is we live on seasons, but not the four seasons. It's actually very small seasons that are rhythmed by certain herbs, by certain fruit. You've been here for years, so you are familiar with the craziness that happens around the apricot season, which is 3 weeks where people go mad and buy tons of apricots. And you know, it's said that the best apricots in the world come from Beit Jala, which is the town next door. But that is how our cuisine is rhythmed, and I tried passing this in the book.
Is it all about fresh ingredients when you cook?
Fresh and local. I don't understand when people ship fresh ingredients from across the world. I don't want, when I am in London and I cook in the restaurant, I don't want meat that's coming from New Zealand or Palestine. And I have nothing against Palestinian meat. I cook Palestinian meat in Bethlehem, and I would, cook English meat in London. And that is very important. We have to understand, in today's world, with the disasters we've done to the environment, to that land that actually gives us our food, the more you're using local produce, the more you're being sustainable and you're being responsible. You know, we're talking right now, we're at my house. The market is a minute's walk away. Why would I want an imported product? And that is essential wherever you are in the world. Now, for dry produce, of course, you'll have to import them. If you're using tahiniya in Scotland, you don't have sesame growing in Scotland, so you'll have to import it. I don't think the impact on dry products is that bad. It is bad, but it's not horrible. The real horror is with fresh produce. Imagine how much energy is used to keep your herbs refrigerated when they're being planted in Kenya and sold in a supermarket in Edinburgh. Imagine how much energy we're using. Imagine how much pollution we're creating. Use local herbs. The good thing with Palestinian food is a lot of the ingredients are things you can find everywhere. I'm talking about the fresh ingredients. And because it's seasonal, try sticking to what's really seasonal in your markets. That is essential wherever I cook. I don't want aubergines in the middle of winter. You know, we say that the best aubergines come from Batir, which is a village south of Bethlehem. I love Batir aubergines. And sometimes I will delay making a recipe and wait until I get those aubergines in season, because that's where it makes sense. You know, we chefs don't exist without the farmers. And we have to remind people this. The farmers, the people who work the land, are the people who are allowing us to have beautiful produce, to have the privilege to taste things. Look at grapes. What do we do as chefs? We serve wine in our restaurants. But behind that, there's a whole layer of the person who's grown the grapes, the winemaker who's selected the grapes at the right time. You know, we are in a place here in Palestine where, and I'm sorry for people who don't know this, the oldest grapes to be planted in the world were planted by the Natufians in Jericho. If we actually go to a biblical story, Moses sent 12 spies to the land of Canaan. And 2 of those spies came back with a fruit that the Israelites didn't know, the grape. And today it's being used as a narrative of Israeli occupation, where they claim that It is Lord Rothschild who was one of the first people to plant grapes and make wine in what is today Israel, but which used to be Palestine, and which is Palestine, will always be Palestine, whether people like it or not, because you have that history. We cannot extract food from the reality of where we are. Where we are right now was called Palestina by the Romans. It's been 2,500 years. Those grapes today are threatened in Palestine because Israeli settlers are taking them up, they're uprooting them across the West Bank. But imagine what the farmer's going through. Imagine that farmer that's planting grapes, that's making fantastic grape juice, that's selling them to a winery, that's making great wines, that is, you know, the symbolic of the work of those farmers. And the book is also a homage to all these farmers.
Does Bethlehem and Palestine produce good food?
I would say it produces some of the best food in the world. But I'm biased because I am from Bethlehem. No, I'm joking. I think all cultures produce fantastic food. If you're on a street corner of Bethlehem and have a warm falafel coming out of it being fried there, it is fantastically delicious. But if you're in a Palestinian home in Bethlehem and the family has spent hours coring courgettes and filling them with rice and meat, that's also delicious. If you are on a street corner in Delhi and you have a pakora or a samosa that's just been fried, it's as good as a falafel in Bethlehem. I think each culture has fantastic food. We have to remember food, like a lot of other things, is universal. We all eat wherever we are in the world. Today, what is unacceptable is that there's 2 million Palestinians being forced starved in Gaza. But Gaza has a fantastic food history, has a fantastic winemaking history. The oldest wines to be commercially sold used to come from Gaza. The cuisine of Gaza, they're on the sea. So there's recipes which we don't have in Bethlehem, where they use seafood, where they use fish, where they use a lot of dill, a lot of chili. That's there in the cuisine of Gaza, which you don't find as flavors in the rest of Palestine. So each place has a very strong food identity.
Have you always wanted to be a chef, and what inspired you?
My grandmother's kitchen as a kid, I would sit in her kitchen and watch her cook. And they entertained quite a bit, my grandparents. My grandfather was the director of the French hospital in Bethlehem, and my grandmother was somebody who founded this Arab Women's Union society. So they entertained quite a bit. And there was always this like hubbub happening in their house of her cooking, getting the tables laid out. So I always wanted to cook. I also always wanted to be in hospitality. I enjoy very much that sense of welcoming people. My mother is a fantastic cook. I still call her every day to ask her, so, how'd you do this? And she laughs and she's like, are you going to be deconstructing that recipe now? But so it's their kitchens that inspired me a lot. And I also have always thought that food is the best way to tell a story.
Have you traveled as a cook?
I have traveled as a cook, so I run a restaurant in London. I've done pop-ups in Switzerland. I've done pop-ups in Jordan. I've done pop-ups in Canada. I've done talks in the United States. I've cooked with students on campus in the US. I've traveled quite a bit as a cook. Always, I think now we're planning a few more trips for the next few months, where I'll be either speaking of food, speaking of the book, or cooking. And it's fabulous to be able to carry a bit of that Palestinian voice.
Where can people get a hold of the book if they'd like to buy it?
So the book is now, at this stage, it's in pre-order until the release on the 14th and 15th of May. It's on pre-order online. You can go through my website, which is fadikattan.com, or you can go through any of your usual book suppliers. So it's on Amazon, it's on Barnes and Nobles, it's on all these platforms. Now it's also being stocked by bookstores ahead of the ahead of the launch date, so you can go to your local bookstore and they'll pre-order it for you. After the 14th and 15th of May, it'll be available in all bookstores, I think, in English language countries. It's also, so we're doing on the 13th of May at Akub at the restaurant in London. We're doing an event where I'll be cooking from the book, and where people are booking their dinner there, and they'll get a free copy. I mean, free copy. They're paying for a copy of a signed book.
Well, Fadi Kattan, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for always carrying those Palestinian voices.